of course. Here's section 1 of the script, minimum 760 words for the story. They switched without warning, and I never said no. Written with directness, emotional clarity, and no filler. This version is optimized for a faceless short story video, focusing on internal narration and impactful pacing. It started like any other night. A quiet kitchen, cold tea, and a phone screen lighting up with nothing important. Jason hadn't texted again. I didn't even expect him to anymore. It was easier to accept the silence than to keep asking why it hurt. Asterisk, I used to wait up for him, dinner ready, candles lit, some illusion of romance still burning. But now the food got cold, and I got used to eating alone. He always had a reason. Meetings, delays, pressure. I tried to understand. I always tried, but there's a difference between being busy and making someone feel invisible. Asterisk, we were married for 5 years, together for 7. The early years were laughter, kisses in parking lots, long drives for no reason. He used to write me little notes, hide them in the fridge or my books, but those stopped. Everything stopped. Except Lucas. He never really left. Asterisk, Lucas and Jason had been best friends since high school. He was always around holidays, birthdays, random Sundays. I used to think of him as just another fixture in our life. The third wheel, the extra voice in the room. But then something shifted, or maybe I just started noticing. Asterisk, Lucas asked questions. He remembered things. My paintings. My favorite red wine. The novel I'd given up on. He teased me about giving up. Told me I was better than that. Jason used to say the same thing before he got tired of listening. Asterisk, one night, Lucas showed up with 2 bottles of wine and a pizza. Jason was out of town, again, supposed to be our anniversary weekend, cancelled last minute, again. I didn't even cry. That was the scariest part. I didn't have the energy left to care. Asterisk, Lucas didn't ask to come in. He just stood there with that half smile and said, "You shouldn't be alone tonight," and maybe I shouldn't have let him in, but I did. Asterisk, we talked, not just small talk, but real things. The kind you forget how to have. About books and silence, and whether people change or just stop pretending. He looked at me the whole time, never at his phone. I hadn't felt that in months. Asterisk, when I laughed at something he said, he stared at me like I'd surprised him, like he hadn't heard it in a long time either. Asterisk, and in that moment, I forgot who he was. Or maybe I remembered who I used to be. Asterisk, I won't pretend it wasn't electric. It was, but nothing happened that night. Just 2 people, too honest for a moment. Sitting too close for too long. Asterisk, still. Something stayed in the room after he left. Something unspoken, heavy, and new. I slept alone but not untouched by it. Asterisk, the next morning, I found myself checking my reflection longer than usual, trying on earrings, lipstick for who I didn't know. Or maybe I did. Asterisk, it got worse after that. Or better, depending on how you look at it. Asterisk, Lucas came around more often. Jason didn't notice. Or didn't care. I cooked for 3, but sometimes it felt like I was feeding only one of them. Jason scrolled through emails. Lucas watched me move. It wasn't a game, it was something quieter, more dangerous. Then came the night that changed everything. Jason had promised a weekend, away. Finally, I booked the cabin, packed the bags, even made his favorite snacks. He called 2 hours before we were supposed to leave. Something about a client emergency. He said sorry, but it was practiced, like muscle memory. I hung up before I could say it was okay, because it wasn't. Asterisk, I was still sitting on the stairs, the suitcase next to me, when Lucas knocked. I heard, he said, already stepping inside. He didn't bring pizza this time. Just a look that told me he knew. Not just about Jason, but about me. The me who kept pretending. The me who wanted something, anything to feel real again. Asterisk, we didn't drink. We didn't talk much. We just sat side by side, barely breathing. Asterisk, when I finally looked at him, he didn't smile. He looked like he was about to say something heavy. Instead, he asked quietly, "Are you happy?" Asterisk, I couldn't lie. I just looked away. Asterisk, and that was the first time I didn't feel guilty for thinking about someone else's hands. Someone else's mouth. Not my husband's. Not anymore. Asterisk, I told myself it was harmless. Just a thought. Just a moment. Asterisk, but thoughts don't stay thoughts for long when they're fed like that. Asterisk, something had already started. I just didn't know yet how far it would go, or what I'd do when the line was crossed without warning, of course. Here's section 2 of the script, minimum 760 words. Continuing directly from the end of section 1, keeping the same intense, faceless, emotionally direct style, no repetition, no fluff. I didn't plan to let it happen. I didn't even know what it was, not until it was already done. Asterisk, after that night, something between us changed. Lucas stopped pretending. The way he looked at me wasn't casual anymore, and I stopped pretending not to notice. I told myself it was harmless to lean into the attention. I needed to feel wanted. I needed to remember I was still something more than forgotten. Asterisk, Jason was barely home that week. He called once, didn't ask how I was, just ran through deadlines and numbers. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. My voice didn't even shake. That scared me more than anything. I didn't miss him, I missed who he used to be. Lucas. Texted late Friday night, I'm coming by, don't argue. I didn't when he arrived. I was barefoot, hair down, wine already open. We didn't speak at first. He just took the glass from my hand, poured for both of us, and sat across from me. The silence between us was heavy, but not uncomfortable. You deserve better, he said finally. I didn't answer. I couldn't. I knew it wasn't about Jason anymore. It was about the space I'd left open and who had stepped into it. He didn't move closer, I did. I didn't remember leaning forward, but I remembered his breath catching. I remembered the way his hand hovered for a second before resting against my jaw. Gentle, intentional. When he kissed me, I didn't pull away. I didn't think my body made that choice before my conscience had time to argue. It didn't go further than that. Not that night. He left after an hour. Said nothing. Just looked at me like he was memorizing something sacred. The door closed behind him, and I didn't cry. I didn't feel ashamed. I just sat there, wide awake, more alive than I'd felt in years. 2 nights later, it happened. Jason had been gone for days, work trip supposedly. I stopped keeping track. I stopped caring. Lucas came over after dinner. We talked like usual, only this time he stayed late. Really late. I fell asleep on the couch. I felt someone behind me in bed hours later. The mattress dipped. Warm breath touched my neck. A familiar body pressed against mine. I didn't open my eyes. I assumed it was Jason. He didn't speak. Just kissed the back of my shoulder. Slow, gentle, then deeper. More intense. There was no rush. No clumsy hands. Just heat and tension. And familiarity. But it wasn't Jason. Not the way he used to be. This felt different. Better. More alive. I welcomed it. It wasn't until afterward, when the room was quiet again, that he whispered something. 4 words. You never said no. I froze. It wasn't Jason's voice. It was softer, lower. My stomach turned. My breath caught, and I rolled over. My eyes adjusted. Lucas. He looked calm. Not smug. Not nervous. Just ... present. I stared at him, heart pounding. My mouth opened, but no words came out. He didn't explain. He didn't apologize. I thought you knew, he said quietly. I wanted to scream. I wanted to slap him. I wanted to rewind time and stop it all, but I didn't move. I didn't speak. I didn't leave. I just laid there, the sheets still warm, the scent of him still on my skin, and the guilt fighting with something far worse, desire. Because the truth is, I liked it, not the lie, not the deception, but the way I felt, desired, chosen, even if it was all wrong. Jason came home the next morning. He brought coffee, kissed me like nothing was different, like my body hadn't betrayed him hours before. Lucas was still there. He passed Jason in the hallway. They exchanged casual greetings like nothing happened, like everything wasn't shattered beneath the surface. I stood in the kitchen, holding 2 mugs, hands trembling. Jason talked about traffic. Lucas asked about the weather. I watched them both, eyes flicking between the man I married and the man I'd just let inside me. My voice stayed silent. My mind screamed I couldn't erase what happened, but I didn't confess either. And maybe that's the real betrayal. It wasn't planned, it wasn't forced, it just ... happened. Because no one warned me, because I didn't say no. Because I wanted something I wasn't supposed to want. And the worst part was, I wasn't even sure I regretted it. Of course, here's section 3 of the script, minimum 760 words. Continuing directly from section 2, keeping the tone sharp, emotionally precise, and avoiding any repetition or unnecessary filler, crafted perfectly for a faceless short story format. Days passed, but nothing felt normal. Jason carried on like everything was fine, like nothing in our home had shifted. He'd talk about meetings, dinner reservations we'd never make, his new watch. I nodded when expected, smiled just enough. He didn't notice the difference. Lucas didn't text, not once. No apology, no explanation. He disappeared like it never happened, but it did, and I lived with it. Wore it like invisible ink on me. I could feel the imprint. Every time Jason touched me, I flinched inside. Not because I hated him, but because I hated myself for letting someone else touch me first in a way he hadn't in years. And worse, I didn't stop it, I let it happen. I wanted it too. One evening, I sat across from Jason while he scrolled through his phone. He was talking, something about his boss. I watched his lips move, but I wasn't listening. All I could think was, if he knew what I did, would he leave? Or would he just ask when dinner would be ready? I imagined telling him. I imagined his face changing. Imagined the silence stretching out until I couldn't breathe. But every time I rehearsed the words, they dissolved before they reached my throat. Because it wasn't just about what I did. It was about what I felt when I did it. I didn't miss Lucas. That would have been simpler. What I missed was how I felt in that moment, unhidden, unapologetic, alive, and I hated myself for craving it again. I thought maybe Lucas would come clean. Maybe guilt would bring him back to the door. But when he finally did return, it wasn't with guilt, it was with confidence. Jason invited him over for dinner, completely unaware. I cooked. I almost didn't, but then I thought, why stop pretending? Now, the three of us sat at the table. The sound of forks on plates. Jason talked, as usual, about work. Lucas laughed at the right times, and I sat in the middle of the lie I helped build, pretending it didn't taste like ash in my mouth. When Jason stepped outside to take a call, Lucas looked at me, really looked at me. That same look from before, the one that knew too much. He still doesn't know, he said, soft but sure. I didn't respond. My hands stayed folded. My face stayed blank. Do you want him to? He asked. I said nothing. His eyes didn't blink. You never said no, he repeated. That was the moment I realized the truth didn't matter to him. The silence had already said everything. My silence, my stillness, my permission without words. I wanted to be angry, to scream, to ask how he could use that against me. But I couldn't, because I knew it wasn't just him. I let it happen. I opened the door, every step of the way. After dinner, Jason kissed me goodnight, his breath warm, his eyes tired. I stared at the ceiling that night, waiting for the guilt to become unbearable. It never did. That scared me more than anything. I never told Jason. Not then, not later. I almost did, but each time, his phone rang, or he turned away, or my courage shrank back into my ribs. I told myself I was protecting him, but really I was protecting the version of myself I wanted to believe still existed. Months passed. Lucas drifted away. Again, no more visits, no more texts. We never spoke of it again. And that silence became the truth we both lived with. Sometimes. I caught Jason staring at me like he was trying to remember something he'd forgotten, like he knew a part of me had changed but couldn't figure out when or why. I smiled when he did that, not kindly, not cruelly, just blankly. One night, I found an old note Jason had written me years ago. I'll never stop choosing you. I sat with it in my hands, feeling nothing. Maybe the worst part of betrayal isn't the act. Maybe it's the moment you realize you don't regret it. I didn't say yes, I didn't say no. I let the switch happen. And I've lived with that silence ever since. Absolutely. Here's section 4 of the script, minimum 760 words, continuing the story with the same clean, precise narrative style, no repetition, and fully in line with the tone of an infidelity short story optimized for a faceless video. I never looked at Lucas the same again, not with longing, not with guilt, just clarity. Whatever that night meant to me in the moment, it didn't survive in the light. I knew now it wasn't connection, it was escape, and escape always comes with a cost. Jason never found out. Not directly, but cracks don't need confessions to appear. They just grow, quietly, slowly, then suddenly everything's shifting, and you can't tell if it's repairable or already ruined. We argued more, not loud, not dramatic, just constant, tired friction. Like we were both trying to hold on to something neither of us wanted to admit was gone. He started asking if something was wrong, if I was okay. I lied repeatedly, not because I was scared of the truth, but because I didn't know which version of the truth would break him. Then came the night he asked if I still loved him. He didn't ask it with anger. He asked it like someone who already knew the answer. I stared at him, felt my mouth move, heard myself say yes, but it was empty. He heard it too. We both sat with that silence longer than we ever had. He didn't push, he just nodded. That was the moment I knew he had accepted something I hadn't yet spoken. From that night on, we functioned like strangers acting out a script we forgot the lines to. We went through the motions, meals, smiles, small talk, but we both knew the foundation was gone. What stayed wasn't love, it was fear, familiarity, a shared history we didn't know how to close the door on. Lucas left town not long after. I heard it from someone else. Jason mentioned it offhandedly like it didn't matter. Moved out west, he said. New job. I nodded. Nothing inside me reacted. The damage was done, and he didn't have to be near to keep the bruise fresh. I didn't speak to him again. Didn't need to. He wasn't the one I needed closure from. I needed it from myself. I tried therapy, I tried journaling. I tried deleting every message, every photo, anything that might remind me of who I was during that time, but memories don't erase themselves. They echo in small moments, in shadows, in smells, in the way someone says your name. One morning, I looked at myself in the mirror and asked a question I had avoided for too long. If Jason had done what I did, would I have forgiven him? I didn't like the answer because it wasn't just about betrayal. It was about becoming someone I didn't recognize. Someone who let silence become permission. Someone who mistook neglect for a license to destroy what little was left. It wasn't love that died first, it was respect. Once that vanished, everything else followed quietly behind. The divorce was clean. No yelling. No tears. Just two people sitting across a table, signing away the life they once promised would last forever. Jason didn't ask why. I didn't explain. We both knew enough to understand that some answers don't change anything. Asterisk. People asked me afterward if I was okay. I always said yes. I kept busy, filled my days with movement and tasks, but inside, I was rebuilding, piece by piece. Not to be who I was before, but to become someone who wouldn't settle for being unseen again. Asterisk. I never blamed Lucas fully. That would have been too easy. It didn't ruin my marriage. He didn't force anything. He just stepped into a space Jason left wide open. And I let him. But letting something happen doesn't mean it was right. I carry that with me. Not as shame but as truth. A truth that reminds me how quickly boundaries blur when you stop defending them. Asterisk. Sometimes I wonder if Jason ever figured it out. If the math in his head ever led him to the night that changed everything. But if he did, he never said it. Maybe. He didn't need to. Asterisk. He moved on quickly. New city, new woman. Someone who laughs at his dry jokes and kisses him like she doesn't see the weight in his eyes. I hope she doesn't. I hope he's different now. Asterisk. I'm not angry. Not anymore. Asterisk. What happened was never about love. It was about absence, about silence, about what grows in the cracks when no one is looking. Asterisk. I've learned to live with it. Not forgive it, not justify it. Just live with it. Asterisk. Because sometimes the betrayal isn't in the act itself. Asterisk. It's in how easily we let ourselves disappear before anyone else ever crosses the line.